Hey, what's up, my people? John Middlekauff, new YouTube channel. What I need you to do, subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, share with your friends. Appreciate everyone that has. It's the podcast, 3 and Out. You can listen wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, Spotify. We got you covered. Also, thevolume.com. We got merch right here. FlexFit hat. Go to thevolume.com. Get yourself a 3 and Out hat. Okay, here's the plan for today. Because the coaches and the quarterbacks talk extra this week. They're forced to talk multiple times, especially the quarterbacks, before the games on Sunday. We'll probably spend more time on Thursday and Friday's podcast. Obviously, looking forward to championship weekend. Stuckey will come on Thursday for Friday's show. And tomorrow we'll get into some of anything Andy, Harbaugh, Kyle, or Campbell, and the quarterbacks and some of the players say. Today's going to be more rapid fire NFL topics. A lot of coaching news, a lot of coordinators moving places. We had a couple general managers named today in Carolina and the Raiders. Some coordinators interviewing places. Buzz around the Falcons and the Chargers when it comes to Jim Harbaugh and William Belichick. So we'll dive into all that. We'll fire through all the stories that I could accumulate today because there was a lot going on, a lot of little stuff around the National Football League on January 23rd. Fun time. It really is. We got 2 big games this weekend and a lot going on the coaching front. So before we dive into all this, here's the thing. Grab your smartphone, grab your iPad, grab wherever you get your applications, and download my friends, your friends, and the official ticketing app of this podcast, Gametime. When you download the Gametime app, search whatever you want to go to. A football game, a basketball game, a hockey match, game, tennis, you name it, any sporting event, concerts, any show you want to go, wherever you live, just type in the venue or type in the artist you want to see and then buy yourself a pair of tickets. Very easy to use, interactive ticketing map. You can see the angles of where your seat is, including the price point. And then when you check out, use the promo code John. Promo code JOHN. So get out, enjoy yourself, get out of the house if you can. I mean, some of you live where it's freezing and you want to buy tickets, something to look forward to. Maybe go to spring training, get down there in Florida or Arizona, get in the heat, get a tan in the middle of March. Well, promo code John, Gametime app, do it now. Okay, let's fire around the NFL. Let's start with the Eagles. That it was made official today that Brian Johnson, their offensive coordinator, will not be returning. Not shocking. Anytime you pay a quarterback a lot of money and he takes a step back and the offense looks dramatically worse, even statistically at points during the season, it wasn't that bad. The eye test was bad. And Jalen definitely was not the same version of the guy we saw last year. And let's face it, there was a stat I saw today that no team, either the guy got promoted to become a head coach or was fired, has the same offensive coordinator from 2022. So in a 2-year period, every team in the NFL has a new offensive coordinator. Think how crazy that is. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because it encompasses being around the most and the highest paid guy on your team. And if he's not the highest paid guy, that usually means he's on a rookie contract or a guy you're trying to replace. But the guy that every team is trying to find a max player at. And that guy, fair or not, and I would say in 2024, it's very fair because how much the game is predicated on throwing. The emphasis and the urgency on that side of the ball is an all-time high. The other thing is when you get a good defensive coordinator, the guy might not be hired, right? Like Mike McDaniel does not need to worry about Vic Fangio going to become a head coach. He's never getting that shot again. Andy Reid is not losing sleep that Steve Spagnuolo is going to become somebody's head coach, even though he's been one of the better defensive coordinators in the league the last couple of years. Doesn't have to think about it. If Steve was an offensive coordinator and the Chiefs' defense was their offense for the last 2 years, he'd be interviewing everywhere. Like there is and listen, it's justified, but that position, that having that ability to call plays and influence the quarterback feels like, from an owner's view, and the front office's view, not a 50-50 proposition than the other side of the ball. It feels much more like it's 80-20. And the league reflects that. And your time in that position is never going to be more short-lived if you do not produce. You will get run out of town immediately. Now, it's football. Coordinators have always been fired. But it feels like the leash that you have is not very long. I mean, Brian Johnson had been on the staff. The quarterback likes him. People seem to like him. And it was like, it would have been the most shocking thing ever if the guy got a second chance. But this reflects a lot of teams in the NFL. When you lose multiple coordinators and your team is good, even if you're not Eagles going to the Super Bowl good in 2022, it's hard to replace those guys. And you can easily get into a position where you hire the wrong people and you make mistakes, whether you think a guy's ready for the job, whether you think you hired the right guy, whether there's some influence by some of your star players. And then you get halfway through the season, you're like, we're screwed. This is a problem. And I think with the Eagles is a good example. I think we knew kind of fast. I think we knew really quickly. Now, for them on the offensive side of the ball, as their offense, as the season went on, felt like it was taking a step back, Shane Steichen was having a lot of success with a backup quarterback. And defensively, they were clearly a disaster. I think there was another story, not that this is shocking, but Matt Patricia won't be back either. So now Nick Sirianni, and this is why him and Howie talk on Wednesday, like his whole plan is he just needs two good coordinators. And if he does not have two good coordinators, he has no shot. And listen, most coaches need a good coordinator. Like Matt LaFleur would be better off if he had a Vic Fangio or a Jim Schwartz on the other side. But the offense is his baby, right? Just with McVay or Andy Reid. Like, did you notice on Sunday in Buffalo who was reading in all the play calls with the big thing in front of his face, the big menu of plays? It was the big guy, the big redhead from Los Angeles, Andrew Reid. So it's like when you have a head coach who influences one side of the ball and calls that, you don't find yourself in these predicaments where you feel extra pressure. It's hard enough replacing a coordinator. It's difficult, right? And I would imagine the Eagles, they interviewed Ron Rivera. Now, I'd be stunned if they hired Ron Rivera, though Jeffrey Lurie and his wife and Ron and his wife are very close friends. Obviously, Ron had worked for Andy way back in the day. There are some connections there, but I would imagine Wink Martindale would be a guy to keep an eye on. Offensive coordinator, no clue. Maybe it's revealed tomorrow, Wednesday. Sirianni's like, I'm going to call the plays. We're going to bring in an offensive coordinator to be more of what Frank Reich was to Doug Peterson. Obviously, if that's the case, we already know he's going to be under the gun heading into the next season. That would light the fire pretty hot. I mean, that'd be pretty intense. I don't necessarily expect that to happen, but it's definitely on the table. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official betting partner of the NFL playoffs, is bringing you an offer to help make the playoffs electrifying. New customers can bet $5 on any game and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook now and use code JOHN. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN John. The crown is yours. The Raiders officially named Tom Telesco their general manager. And I guess anytime you hire a coach first, especially when it was a situation like an interim coach, I didn't really have I guess I assumed they would make the interim general manager the next head coach, the next GM, Champ Kelly. But reading, Vic Tafur has covered the Raiders for a long, long time, and a couple other guys for The Athletic who do a really good job. There have been articles for the last week that Mark Davis was not comfortable having two guys who have never been in this position holding those two roles. And he's had two first-time GMs from Ziegler and before that Mike Mayock who made some pretty terrible personnel moves and made some moves that clearly you knew right away you would like to have back. And I wonder if, he was backed into a corner. It kind of had an NBA feel to it where his best player said, if you don't hire Antonio Pierce, I'm going to demand a trade. Don't totally blame Max Crosby. Like, if I'm Max, if you don't hire the guy I want, I'm fucking over this. This sucks. I don't want to play here anymore, which would have been a major problem for the Raiders because, one, he's just an awesome player, and two, like what he represents, and clearly like he's one of the lone positives on the Raiders over the last couple of years. But listen, Antonio Pierce, I've said it over and over. My only question is in an offensive league, you get a guy that knows nothing about offense and you have no quarterback. So the other side of the ball is such a major question mark. I've never questioned, like, could he lead? Like, that's something he's been doing probably since he was 10 years old. That's a natural position to put him in. Same thing with Gerard Mayo. Same thing with Mike Vrabel. Same thing with D'Amico Ryans. Certain guys just got that. That's the least of his worries, right? It's just going to be about the other side of the ball. And they're interviewing offensive coordinator candidates, which is obviously a huge hire, but they still don't have a quarterback. And it's not like they're drafting in the top 5. How are you going to get one? Do you trade up? That's going to be a huge area to be discussed for the Raiders. But I understand why they hired Tom Telesco, because the other guys they were interviewing had never held that job. And you can't have Antonio Pierce, that was a couple years ago was basically a recruiting coordinator and an assistant coach for the Arizona State Sun Devils, to all of a sudden being your head coach in the NFL and not have an infrastructure around him to help. And I think hiring Tom Telesco, who's done the job for a decade. Now, you can nitpick his moves. You can nitpick everyone's moves. From Belichick to Howie to John Lynch to John Schneider. Everyone makes bad picks. But I would say over the course of his career, like, he's a pro. Now, some of the coaches, and this is the other thing, like, am I putting all the coaches on him? You know, there were rumors years ago that he wanted Dayball, that the organization wanted Brandon Staley. I don't know. I'm not, cowards, boys with him. I don't know the guy. I've always respected him. I think he's a pretty solid general manager. But to be a good general manager, and this was one of his downfalls with the Chargers, you're only as good as your head coach. So I don't, to my knowledge, they don't have a working relationship. Clearly, they've never been around each other. Maybe they've known each other in passing a little bit from a scouting perspective, maybe through Arizona State. But this relationship has to work. And if you're Tom, you got lucky in the sense that most GMs don't get a second shot. Unless your name is Bill Polian or Ron Wolf. I mean, usually GMs, this is not coaching, where a lot of coaches get 2, sometimes get 3 spot shots. Most GMs get 1. And especially when you have a long period of time like Tom did in the Chargers, and he had like 3 playoff appearances, right? It's not like he won the 1 Super Bowl. Like, no. So this is a lucky opportunity to get a second crack at it. And this is a tough job, because the next thing I was going to go into is Harbaugh. There are so many rumors out there. I've heard this from people in the NFL for 3 weeks. Everyone thinks he's going to the Chargers. Now, Harbaugh is a great wild card, right? You never truly know till the pen and the paper is signed. He's like, I'm coming. Like, I've said all along, if you just told me there's a report, Adam Schefter, Harbaugh told the team, I'm coming back to Michigan, I wouldn't be shocked, right? If you tell me Harbaugh signed with the Chargers, be like, okay, totally saw that one coming. But he's one of those guys that go multiple ways. It's pretty clear it's the Chargers or bust at this point. But like, until you tell me he's the Chargers head coach, what he has at Michigan's pretty special. Obviously, with his parents around him, how good the program is. Now, it's much easier to leave because of having won the national championship. But a lot of these coaches, like, and we'll get into Belichick here in a second, it's clear what they're asking for. Like, this isn't like the cost of Jim Harbaugh is $15 to $18 million. It's more about, like, how much are we paying my staff? Who's the personnel people that I have to answer to? Who's in charge of the roster? Everything that I've become accustomed to doing at Michigan, which is run like an NFL program, just like Ohio State, just like Georgia, just like Alabama, just like LSU. I want these things to happen here too. And I need yeses before I sign the contract about how much money I'm going to make. I'm going to make a lot. Welcome to football coaching for good coaches in 2024. So clearly they're working on that, and for Jim to feel comfortable, but all signs point to him going there. And then this gets back to the Raiders of, like, so Antonio Pierce would be in a division against Andy Reid, Sean Payton, and Jim Harbaugh. Like, it's pretty difficult. That's really, really difficult. Like, it's pretty hard. Like, Jonathan Gannon showed up this year to the NFC West. It had Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, and Pete Carroll. Like, it's not an easy division. So I just think that if that goes down, the pressure, that Raider situation, you got to find a way to get a quarterback and figure out offense. Because, yeah, you'd be like, well, the Broncos don't have a quarterback. Well, their head coach is the play caller. So I feel somewhat confident that they can figure it out as they go. At the end of the day, the Raiders are going to be a culture-led operation with Antonio Pierce, but he's not calling the offensive plays. And you're in a division with obviously Mahomes, who's going to go down as like the second greatest player of all time. Herbert, who if he gets Harbaugh, is going to be better. And I would imagine the Denver Broncos figure something out at the quarterback position. Last night when I was eating dinner, it surfaced that the Titans and Rand Carthen had hired Brian Callahan, who is the son of Bill Callahan and who has been the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals since I think that group got there in 2019, and obviously has been the offensive coordinator during Joe Burrow's time. I didn't know much about him besides the name, and I text a buddy who had coached with Brian Callahan, loves him, swears by him. And me and this guy have a good relationship. Like, if a guy sucks, he'll crush. If a guy's good, he has nothing. There's no agenda here. He was very, very high on him. Now, you never know, but listen, I understand it. Offensive guy, your play caller, a football guy who's been around it his entire life, someone that's well respected around the NFL, someone who comes from a very successful organization who's been around a big time quarterback. So I don't have some like crazy take on this one besides, yeah, totally understand it. Makes sense. I mean, that's the type of guys I would interview, especially if you're the Titans and you're not going to hire, some $15-20 million coach. He's a guy that maybe strike lightning in a box. Maybe you get your Zach Taylor or Matt LaFleur. And that's, I think, kind of what they're hoping for here. And you definitely get a guy who I think one issue that you always pivot, right? If you're ever in a relationship with something and she does something that you don't like, your next relationship, the person usually does the opposite. It's no different in football coaching, right? When you have a guy who's a huge personality, complete, and when I say asshole, I mean that in a good, positive football way, but can just be a lot, usually go the opposite direction the next time. I saw it with the 49ers with Harbaugh to Tom Sula, right? No different. Bill Belichick to Gerard Mayo. Watch Gerard Mayo's press conference and go, oh, no wonder they like this guy. And I would imagine the Titans and, the organization was looking just for someone to be a little easier on a daily basis. Now, here's the problem. In the sport of football, that can get you beaten, that can get you beat fast. Like sometimes that quote-unquote dick or the a-hole is doing it for a reason. It's kind of needed. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on this guy replacing Vrabel. I understand they haven't won in the last couple of years, but went to the playoffs a lot, and we're very competitive there for a while with Ryan Tannehill. Dan Morgan was named the general manager. When I close my eyes and think Dan Morgan, I think the University of Miami and like the White Ray Lewis. That guy was incredible in college. I mean, I feel like in college, he's one of the best defensive players I've ever seen. Just a dominant player. Cool guy. Met him a couple times in the scouting world. I've just kind of followed his career from afar. Very, very difficult job. Very, very hard. I mean, you're working for an absolute nut job. You're working for a guy that just at any moment could fire every single person in his path. So I understand if you're Dan Morgan, you played there, you're part of the city, but it's a risky job to take, right? Because it could go poorly just because you work for some of these crazy owners. They can derail your career. They really can. And this feels like a situation that I would bet against just because until we're proven otherwise, I don't see how you don't bet against David Tepper. You're like, listen, if the guy wants to invest my money, he can have every penny. I trust him to do that. When it comes to his football operation, program, coaching staff, front office, players, I expect weird stuff to happen all the time. So until he proves some normalcy, I would not feel very confident. But listen, Dan Morgan named GM. Maybe he's crazy enough to handle it. A lot of reports in Atlanta, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, about Belichick and a lot of pushback internally. And their incumbent GM, some of the people, that are close to Arthur Blank, don't want any part of him, which makes sense. And we talked about if you have a job, you wouldn't want a guy to be hired over you that would threaten your job. Not that he's replacing you, but that he won't need you or he won't listen to you or your power will be kind of irrelevant. So if I were all those people and had their roles, I wouldn't want Bill Belichick either. Because within a year, if Bill just gets us to 10-7 and we're in the first round of the playoffs and we win a playoff game, if Bill goes to Arthur, listen, Arthur, I played nice this first year because I tried to, right? I wanted to. I wanted to show you that I still got it. But we just won a playoff game. We won the division. We won a playoff game. I want Billy, Jimmy, and Rich gone. They can all see that coming. So, of course, they're going to want to do, because every day I look up, Atlanta is interviewing someone else's assistant coach. Because if you're those guys, you want to hire one of those people. You want to hire Raheem Morris. Not because he's a bad candidate, but because, like, he doesn't threaten your job. Bill does. And it's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out, because everyone that's kind of close to the NFL, that covers the NFL, was like, Arthur Blank is going to want Bill Belichick. And it felt like he does. And now it feels like he's getting a lot of pushback to people that he clearly likes and respects. I would have guessed originally that Belichick was a lock to be the head coach, but the longer this goes, who knows? I mean, they're the Falcons for a reason. And last but not least, some coordinator interviews that I find pretty interesting. The Saints, who had fired their offensive coordinator, interviewed both Kubiak's son and Brian Griese, who are Kyle Shanahan's kind of right-hand guys on the offensive side of the ball. I think anytime that Zach Robinson, Sean McVay's right-hand guy, listen, I think it's pretty clear. If I ran an NFL team and I was a defensive coach and we needed an offensive coordinator, I would go to the Packers, the 49ers, and the Rams. And I would want to implement what they do offensively, because that is the most quarterback friendly. And especially if I got Derek Carr, like, we should be able to run aspects of that offense. We have good players on offense. We should be able to function in that offense. He can play under center, play action, get rid of the ball fast. This doesn't need to be a complicated offensive structure. So I think when you see these Rams and 49er guys interviewing, I don't see how you're not all over them, right? Like Shane Waldron was named the offensive coordinator with the Bears. Makes a lot of sense. Had coached with the Rams, went to Seattle, knows that scheme. So even if I get Caleb Williams, everyone's like, can he play out of the structure of the offense? In that offense, it's relatively basic, right? Ideally, you run the ball a lot, and there's a lot of play action layup throws. Now, it's the NFL. Stuff happens, and you're going to need to make plays out of your you-know-what. But if all things go well, it's a very quarterback-friendly offense. And then from there, the guy can kind of build his own reputation as a player, right? But ideally, if you play in the construct of that offense, and we got some good players, which the Bears do have, you should be pretty successful. So totally understand that hire.